السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم وهو أحسن القائلين وأصدق الصادقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وجاءت سكرة الموت بالحق ذلك ما كنت منه تحيد ونفخ في الصور ذلك يوم الوعيد. وجاءت كل نفس معها سائق وشهيد لقد كنت في غفلة من هذا فكشفنا عنك غطاءك فبصرك اليوم حديد. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. For the purification of the souls and the enlightenment of the hearts, and for the hastening of the reappearance of Baqiyatullah al-A'zam, Ruhi wa Arwah al-Alameen lahu al-Fida, enlighten your souls and the atmosphere with the recitation of salawat upon Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is a fact of life, a universal law. It affects each and every creation of God. It does not distinguish between the old and the young, between the women and the men, between the kings and the servants. It strikes at any moment and at any place. People run away from it. People are afraid of it. People don't want to talk about it. Yet, after it begins the real life. The subject of death is a universal subject that affects the lives of each and every human being. It's a subject that when we look at it on the surface level, we find that you and I are touched by it, whether we like it or not. All around us, the idea of death emerges in different shapes or forms, whether through natural disasters, whether through people passing away in a normal fashion, whether when we see the massacres happening around the world, such as in Syria, whether it's domestic issues like the use of guns and gun laws in this country. You and I are aware of the subject of death, and it's presented before us in many shapes and forms. Sometimes we contemplate the idea of death when we watch movies. Most of us have watched movies like Ghost or Ghost Town or The Sixth Sense, or in fact there is a movie by the name of Hereafter, which was indeed produced and edited by Clint Eastwood and others. These movies in Hollywood reflect the idea of death. Likewise, what do we find? We find that people die in different shapes and forms. Some people die due to accidents. Others die in the most peculiar of ways. In 2012, a man by the name of Edward Archbold, who indeed was from this country, from the United States, died. Why? He is from Florida. He died because of a competition that he entered, which is named as the competition of eating cockroaches. This man died because he choked on a cockroach. Others died because of other reasons, like a man by the name of Kurt in 1978. He is from America, also an Austrian. He died because of starvation. Why? He was paranoid. When his wife was taken to hospital, he would not eat anything other than the food that his wife would cook. Whatever they presented before him, he would say no. He was paranoid and he died due to starvation. The subject of death, therefore, is of the utmost importance. Yet sometimes in the West, what happens is that subjects like death and others that people dislike talking about, they refer to it when it comes to jokes and what? And humor. They look at death through this particular way. For instance, they say that two people died and they met each other in the hereafter, in the afterlife. One person asked the other, how did you die? The response was, I died because I froze to death. He then asked the other, how did you die? He said, I died due to a heart attack. He said, how did this happen? He said, one day I came home and outside I heard that there is a voice of a man inside the house. Immediately I thought that my wife is what? Is with another man. I went inside, I searched and I couldn't find another man. Then I felt so shameful that I accused my wife of infidelity that I had a heart attack and I died. The first person looked at him and said, if only you had found me in the fridge, we'd both be alive today. In other words, what? In other words, that sometimes death is presented in such a manner. Yet when you look at the subject, you'll find in the 21st century, and especially in this day and age, is being discussed more in the Western world. You look at the Time magazine, for instance, in June this year, it published an article. What was the title of the article? The New American Way of Death. New American Way of Death. You're thinking, what does that mean? Do people die differently in this country? The article discusses and dissects the ever increasing use of cremation when it comes to what? Dealing with the deceased and the dead bodies. Cremation, of course, is what? Cremation is the process by which the body is placed in a cardboard box. A tag is placed on it. Thereafter, after the paperwork is finished, it is put through a very hot chamber. The temperature is raised to 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, over 800 degrees Celsius. And so what happened is that the body is then reduced to grey ash and placed in a small box, presented to whom? Towards the family. And there is an increasing business in this country and in Europe whereby the type of box that the ashes are produced in or put in is now a growing trend when it comes to variations. So you have, for instance, boxes that are decorated, boxes that are made out of the objects that were the favorite for what? For the deceased. In this country, in 2011, over 40% of those who died were cremated. A staggering figure, isn't it? Especially in a predominantly Christian country. It is projected that by 2017, 50% of those who die in the United States of America are subjected to cremation. Why, you ask? Because it costs over $2,000 to cremate a body, whereas it costs over $7,000 to bury. And people are looking for cheaper options to deal with those that have passed away. Hence you find that the idea of cremation is something that is being discussed, and it is indeed related to what? It is related to death. When you come to the subject of death, you begin to understand its importance and its relevance in the lives of human beings, to the extent that when you talk about it with others, they say it's a gloomy subject. I don't want to talk about it. It depresses me. It makes me anxious. I'm fearful. What is the term that expresses the fear of death? Thanatophobia. Thanatophobia is the fear of death. And in 2005, a Gallup survey questioned over 1,000 youth between 13 to 17 in the United States about what they fear most. Number one was what? Terrorism. It was after the atrocity of 9/11. Number 2 was what? Spiders. That the youth are afraid of spiders, second after terrorism. Number 3 is death. So the third most fearful thing for many youth is to think about maut or death. You and I as believers, you and I as Muslims, need to take ourselves outside of this box, outside of this phenomena of fearing this subject. Why? Because as believers we need to be different. If you and I do exactly the same thing as others when it comes to this subject and other areas, then truly we do not stand out. We cannot call ourselves as individuals who have sought to be illuminated by the teachings of the religion of Islam. Why is it therefore that people fear this subject? Why is it that they fear that it is a subject which brings them anxiety, depression, and indeed a gloomy area to look at? For 3 reasons. Understand these 3, therefore we can work towards eliminating its fear from our hearts and from our minds. The first reason that people fear death is because of the fear of the unknown. How many of us know what will happen? What is this journey all about? What are the processes that will occur? What is it that you and I will be subjected to? All that we know about death is from movies and from what others have told us. In other words, what brings apprehension to our hearts, anxiety. Somebody came at the time of Imam Al-Askari, sallallahu wasallam alayhi, the 11th holy Imam of the Ahlul Bayt. And he said, Ya Rasulullah, there is a man who's about to die and he's petrified, he's shaking. Imam came next to him and said, are you afraid? He said, Ya Rasulullah, I am going to die of death, of the fear of death. Imam said to him, why? He said, because I don't know what's going to happen to me. Imam said to him, can you imagine that you're suffering or you're in a state of filth and uncleanliness, Barzakh, and you go to a public bathroom, because at that time they didn't have bathrooms or restrooms as you guys call them in this country. They did not have them in their homes. They had them outside, so people would go outside. Imam would say, can you imagine that you would go to this place and your body would be cleansed and purified from all the dirt? This man said, yes, sir, that would be amazing. Imam said, how would you feel? Your body would be cleansed and purified, feel very refreshed, cleansed, clean, white, pure. Imam says, for the believer, death is exactly that. So number 1, we fear death because of what? Because we don't know what's happening. Number 2, you and I, as human beings, crave longevity. We wish to remain alive as much as possible. And this is something that the shaitan knew when he spoke to Adam. He came to Adam alayhi salam, the prophet, and he said to him, do you wish to live forever? Adam says, yes. He said, then look at this tree. Eat from this tree and you'll live forever. That as human beings, we do not wish to depart. This is applicable to all, especially the kings and the tyrants, the dictators who have assumed wealth and are ruling people unjustly. A man by the name of whom? Al-Ma'mun al-Abbasi, who was the tyrant at the time of Imam al-Ridha, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi. He had assumed so much wealth. He had indeed killed the Imam alayhi salam. He was traveling with the entourage and with his army, and he stopped somewhere. Where did he stop? He stopped at a place which was picturesque, which was an area of amazing natural beauty. He looked at this place and he saw the water running. And he said, you know what, bring my throne, place it on a small bridge that you will build, and I wish to enjoy this wonderful area. I wish to enjoy this wonderful place. He sat there and he placed his hands on the water in order to take out the fish that was indeed swimming under him. As soon as he placed his hand on the water, he felt a shiver. He started shaking. He didn't know what that was. He called the physician. The physician came, diagnosed him as what? Illness that will eventually lead to death.
You're going to die. You're suffering with an illness. There is no return. Now here, there was a moment for Ma'mun to reflect. He stood there, looked at his vast army, looked at the wealth that he had, and realized that this idea of longevity cannot be established. Then he looked at the heavens and said the following: Ya man la yazulu mulkuh, irham man qad zala mulkuh. Oh, the one whose wealth never disappears, have mercy on the one whose wealth is about to disappear. I'm about to leave. There is nothing that can hold me back. That's the second reason. And the third reason is what? The third reason why you and I dislike talking about death is because we have not prepared for our akhirah. And here I would like to tell you a story, a beautiful story that highlights this point. It is mentioned, and this story is from one of the A'imma alayhum salam, that it is mentioned that an individual was traveling where? On a ship. And the ship sunk. And it was only him that remained. He held on to a wooden plank and he was taken through the waves of the water to an island. An island by which he could see skulls and the bodies of people. He recognized that it was the end for him. At that moment, after a few days, he saw people approaching with a boat. He was delighted that he will be saved. He looked at them and says, will you save me? They said, of course, you are our king. He said, excuse me, I'm your king? They said, yes, come with us and we'll tell you. They took him on the boat and they took him to a city. As soon as he entered that city, according to the Imams, he was welcomed as a king. They placed him on a throne. They gave him whatever he wanted. And then they said to him, every 3 years, we choose our kings by going to this particular island and finding an individual who has been stranded. And we found you. Therefore, you are our king today. He looked at them, just like how you and I should do when we sign any contract. He said to them, are there any terms and conditions? You know, read the small print. Most of us don't read the small print. He said to them, are there any terms and conditions for this? They said, yes. There is a term that I have to abide by. He said, what is it? They said that you become a king for 3 years. And after you finish, we'll take you back to this island that we find you. He said, are you serious? They said, yes, we'll take you back exactly where we find you. He said, no problem. As soon as he assumed this particular leadership and became the king, the first thing that he did was what? What did he do? He said, I would like to go to that island. They said, what? He said, yes, I would like to take with me many people and I would like to take with me many equipments and a lot of wealth. They said, you're the king, you can do whatever you want. He went to that island, he started building palaces. He started building gardens. He started harvesting farms and crops. Until after the 3 years, when he was sitting in his throne in the city, they came to him and said, Your Majesty, it's time to go to that island. Your rulership has now ended. He said, Bismillah, I'm ready. Please take me. I'm looking forward. They said, how? Every time we wish to take somebody, they cry and they beg us and they say, don't take me, don't take me. He said, I'm different. I've prepared for it. When they took him to that island, they were amazed. He had built some amazing palaces. He had in there people. He had in there food. And the Imam alayhi salam would that say that the parable of this island is akhirah. And the city is this dunya. That when you and I have not prepared for that particular island, we're petrified to go to it. We do not wish to depart from our cities. But if we have indeed constructed what could be done in that place, eternal place of abode, then we would do whatever to go to it and are not afraid to depart from our cities, from this dunya. Hence, when we recognize this, we recognize the importance of this subject and the need for it to be dissected in detail. And here's the news. That for the next 5 or 6 nights, we will go through this subject in the utmost of detail. Why? Because some of you may say, oh dear, going through the death and the afterlife and Alam al-Barzakh in such extensive detail is for what reason? Why are we doing this? What is it that we will talk about? We will talk about a number of important things. First of all, how do we prepare for it? Physically, mentally, and spiritually. Number two, what are the processes that we go through physically in terms of Sharia law? In other words, if you were in a particular country and you had a loved one, a friend with you, a non-Muslim country, you went for a holiday, you went to Barbados, for instance, and somebody passed away from your family members, God forbid. What do you do then? They are there on the deathbed. What is expected from you? What do you do then in terms of the ghusl, takfeen, the burial? What are the recommendations that you and I should be thinking about? We need to know this beforehand so that we are prepared. Thirdly, as soon as an individual dies, what goes through the soul? What is the extensive understanding of Alamul Barzakh, the intermediary world? What happens to people? What classifications are they through? Can we help them? Can we help ourselves when we are in Alamul Akhirah? But importantly, my dear brothers and sisters, please understand this point. The objective of this examination, which is going to be extensive and quite detailed, is for two reasons. Number one, the belief in death, afterlife, is a crucial one and part of our aqeedah. In other words, you and I will be questioned on the day of judgment about this belief. I can't call a Maulana or refer to a scholar or Google it when it comes to these things. I need to know. I need to have it in my heart. It needs to be deeply rooted in my existence. Therefore, the purpose of the next few nights is to increase our knowledge. Number two, it's going to be a practical analysis. It's going to be a discussion based on what would help us in this journey, in this utmost important journey. What practical things can you and I do so that we are in the best shape and in the best possible position when we go through this process ourselves? No human being can what? Can evade it. Question to start off this discussion is, what is the importance of this discussion? Why should we talk about it? Here, I will give you 10 points in case anyone is doubtful about its importance. 10 points we will talk about why the subject of death and barzakh and the hereafter is of the utmost importance. Why you and I need to have a clear recognition of the area. Number one, the Quran, the book of guidance, the book that directs us to where and how we should lead our lives, the book that you and I need to be acquainted with, the book that you and I need to have with us all the time in order for us to refer to. What do I mean? When you and I travel, what do we take with us? We take with us our luggage, our baggage. We pack our bags in accordance of what we need. Imagine that you're traveling and you go to the airport here in Detroit or anywhere around the world and you check in your luggage. They say to you, excuse me, what you have is too much. You have excess weight. You look at the bag and inside you have candy. You have food. In the UK, we call it chocolate. What do? You say, you know what? I can take this out. Why? I can eat it. And once I eat it, the luggage weight would be less. True? No one's going to weigh me. Yes, my weight will increase. But no one's going to assess how much I weigh when I go where? When I go inside that plane. But they'll assess the luggage, right? What happens is that when we transfer to the afterlife, what can we take with us? We can't take anything. But what's inside us can come with us. In other words, if the Quran has been embedded in our flesh and in our blood, then it will help us in the hereafter. But if I place the Quran and I say, you know what, I want 10 copies of the Quran placed around my grave, will that come to my assistance and help? Will that come to my aid? Just like that parable in the journey. The Quran, my dear brothers and sisters, discusses a number of important subjects. Let's talk statistics. What is the most common subject discussed in the Holy Quran? Think about it. What is the idea that is often referred to in most references in the Quran? 30% of the Quran talks about this particular idea. 1,920 ayat talk about Allah, God the Almighty, Jalla wa Ala, the absolute perfect being. هو الله الخالق البارئ المصور له الأسماء الحسنى يسبح له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in 1920 ayat in the Holy Quran talks about what? Talks about His unity, talks about His existence, talks about the importance of the belief in Tawheed and monotheism. That's the most commonly talked about subject in the Holy Quran. Question: what is the second most common subject in the Holy Quran? Whereby you'll find what? You'll find 26% of the ayat, equating to 1,480 verses. That subject is what? Death, Akhirah, Barzakh. So here we have an important realization. If the second most important subject in the Quran, whereby 26% of the ayat talk about this phenomena, shouldn't we talk about it? Shouldn't we discuss it? A quarter of the Quran, my dear brothers and sisters, talks about death and the Day of Judgment. A quarter of the Quran is telling you and I, think about it, don't run away from it, understand it, it's not what you think. A quarter of the Quran is asking us to reflect. Should we ignore a quarter of the Quran just because, you know what, it's too gloomy? I'm too young. I don't want to talk about death. I don't want to speak about it. I don't want to prepare for it. I have my whole life ahead of me. What do we do with this quarter of the Quran? Should we shelve it? Should we ignore it? Or should we think about it in the best possible way? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Therefore, the realization hits us hard, my dear brothers and sisters, that the ayat of the Quran are not there coincidentally. They're not there by chance. The fact that the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala places 1,480 ayat about akhirah, about death, is sending us a strong, profound message. Read about it, understand it, reflect and prepare. This is the clear message that the Holy Quran is sending us. That's number one. Number two, why should we discuss and talk about in extensive detail the subject of death and the hereafter? The second is the fact that when you look at the early years of the life of the Holy Prophet, when it comes to his prophethood and the declaration of his message, in Mecca, the discussion surrounded what? The idea of the Akhirah. The idea of what awaits human beings, what awaits people of different denominations when it comes to the other realm. The Quran says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It's all about where we began from and to whom we shall return. Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Imam al-Muttaqeen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, in a beautiful, absolutely sublime hadith which you and I should memorize. What does he say? He says, Rahimallahu mra'an arifa min ayn wa fi ayn, and what? Wa ila ayn. May the mercy of God be on whomsoever has the cognizance, ma'rifah, not just the knowledge, deep reflection, understanding of what? Where they came from, where are they now, and where they're heading towards. In other words, the Prophet of Islam would begin this discussion with the non-believers in order to bring them to the realization that this world is transient, this world is temporary, and the akhirah is the eternal place of abode. You cannot run away from it. You cannot just simply ignore it. قُلْ إِنَّ الْمَوْتَ الَّذِي تَفِرُّونَ مِنْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مُلَاقِيكُمْ ثُمَّ تُرَدُّونَ إِلَىٰ عَالِمِ الْغَيْبِ وَالشَّهَادَةِ فَيُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِمَا كُنْتُمْ تَعْمَلُونَ. Allah says the death that you're running away from, indeed it will come to you. You cannot indeed avoid it. That's number 2. Number 3, the Quran tells us, it's very interesting. Most of us, please pay attention to this point, most of us describe our homes or where we live as where the destination or the countries that we reside in. For instance, somebody will come to you and say, where do you live? You say that my home is Dearborn, Detroit, the United States of America. People come to others in the Middle East and they will describe their homes or where they come from or where they were born. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the message of the prophets was what? The message of all the prophets was the following. Inna akhlasnahum bikhalisatin dhikra dar. We purified these prophets so that they tell people where their homes are. Where are their homes? Dhikra dar. Dar is their homes. We are told in the Quran that our homes that you and I have been created for is Jannah, is paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so merciful. The Almighty Jalla wa Ala is full of compassion and love. You and I have been created for paradise, for Jannah. That's our place. That's our home. Allah says, prepare for that house, that home, that eternal place that you will return to. Therefore, you should know about it. You should be able to understand everything that is needed to be understood about it. That's number 3. Number 4, in 30 places in the Quran, this is all statistics that you need to know. 30 places in the Quran, Allah says what? تُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. He places the belief in God and the belief in the hereafter right next to each other. It's simultaneous, which means what? That most of the times when we speak to atheists, that when we speak to non-believers who deny the existence of God, one of the most effective tools and ways in which we can deliver the pristine message of monotheism and tawheed is to talk about the hereafter. Tell me, can we talk about the hereafter when our knowledge and understanding and comprehension of it is not up to scratch? Can we talk about it in the best possible way when our knowledge is not how it should be? Therefore, the Quran places these two together. That's number 4. The other point, number 5, is what? The reason why we need to know more about the journey of death is what? Is that the Quran tells us that before all the other actions that you and I do, an important precursor is to believe in the unseen. الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون. The belief in the unseen is the prerequisite. It is the journey, beginning of the journey towards what? Towards prayers, towards fulfilling our tasks, towards establishing what is obligatory in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number 6 is a form of purification, my dear brothers and sisters. Al-Rasul al-A'zam Mohammed sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam famously mentions, Kafa bil mawti wa'idha. It's sufficient for death to what? To be the point whereby you and I are shaken to the core. It helps us to purify ourselves. The author of the famous commentary of the Holy Quran, Allama Tabatabai Radwanullahi Ta'ala alayh, says there is only one business that you and I have in this world. One thing. What is that? Purification. Cleansing our souls. reaching Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this qalb salim. يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ salim. This pristine, pure heart. The idea of the remembrance and the understanding of death is what? So that it purifies us. It puts everything in perspective. Most of you have heard of what? A man by the name of Steve Jobs. Haven't you? If you haven't heard of him, then you're using products that were developed by him. Products that have changed the world and the way we use technology. Of course, we are talking about a man who is instrumental in the development and the success of the company known as Apple. From the iPads to the iPhones, to the many products that you and I see around the world today, this man was indeed an important individual. But when he died, he touched the hearts of so many. And it's interesting that when he died, people started to refer to a statement that he spoke about when it comes to death. Unfortunately, sometimes people refer to individuals like Steve Jobs and do not refer to the Ma'soomeen for inspiration when it comes to statements regarding death. Yet it doesn't necessarily cause a problem for us to look at what he said when it comes to this area. I'll read you to what he said, some of the extracts to what he mentioned when it comes to the idea of death. He said, remember that I'll be dying soon. And this realization is the most important tool to make the biggest choices in my life. He was diagnosed with cancer. He recognized that he will be departing from this world. He said that recognition was of the utmost importance to make me understand what choices are there before me in this existence. Then he says, no one wants to die. True. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. He then references and says, and yet death is a destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it, and that's how it should be. Why? Because death is very likely the single best invention of life. Amazing, huh? This man says death is the most important and significant invention of life. It's a life-changing agent. Think about it. Reflect it. That a non-Muslim says something like this about death, because he had come to this realization knowing that death was around the corner. When we say that it's remembrance and the understanding of the processes and the journey of death is the utmost importance, we are talking about something that may change the life of the human being. I recall a few years ago here in this country, a young man, a 17-year-old man came to me after a majlis and said, I have a problem. I said to him, what's your problem? He said that I go to school, and in school there's a girl that has a crush on me. What can I do? She has a crush on me. I said, okay, so what's the problem? He says, every time I go to the classroom, she comes and hugs me. And when she hugs me, I hug her back, an eye for an eye. Is this haram? Can I do that? I said, it's not permissible in Sharia law. You can't touch somebody who is non-mahram to you. He said, then I have a problem. I can't deal with it. I can't say no to her. There's a temptation in my heart. He said, can you help me? I said, I'm going to give you something to do. Will you do it? He said, I'll try. I said, go to the cemetery. He said, excuse me? I said, tomorrow, go to the local graveyard and just sit there and reflect. If you find an empty grave, just look at it also. And that's all. He said, I'm not sure it will help. I said, try it. He came back, my dear brothers and sisters, a few days later after the majlis and said, my dear brother, if this girl was Miss USA, I'll never hug her again. I said, why? He said, I looked at those graves and I thought with myself, how will I help myself after I depart from this world? And when I'm questioned and subjected to accountability as to what I did, I can't help myself. Therefore, I should try and attempt to do what I can now before it's too late. It's a source of purification. Number 6, number 7, it's the best antidepressant. How? Most of us go through grief, depression, anxiety, difficulties in life. We are dealt with in a way that we feel what? Hard done by. We go through hardship. The remembrance of death puts everything in perspective. How? That we know this life is short term, but importantly, we know that the justice of Allah will be manifested when? On the Day of Judgment. Therefore, if I'm wronged in any shape or form, I know that Allah is watching, and I know that there is another realm that He will come to my aid and the truth will prevail. Therefore, it's the best way to deal with life's calamities, life's hardship, and life's difficulties. Number 8, if you don't think about death, then the following will happen. You will be inclined more towards what? Disobedience of Allah, sinning, transgression. The Quran says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Waylun lil mutaffifin. Woe be to those who cheat others. Why? أَلَا يَظُنُّونَ أُولَٰئِكَ أَنَّهُمْ مَبْعُوثُونَ لِيَوْمٍ عَظِيمٍ. Have these people that deceive and cheat and conceal from others in all shapes or form and are dishonest, do they not know that they will face Allah on that absolutely amazing and horrifying day, the Day of Judgment? So the lack of remembrance of death, number 8, makes us what? Makes us inclined towards evil, inclined towards sin. Number 9 does what? It hardens our heart and stops us from receiving the light and the guidance and the mercy of God the Almighty. Because the Quran speaks about hearts that are soft and hearts that are hard. And if you look at the riwayat, they say the lack of the understanding and the remembrance of death makes our hearts hard rock, whereby we do not become receptive, whereby we turn away from the message. Some people ask, when I read the Quran, I don't react to it. When I listen to the Masa'ib of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein and the Ahl al-Bayt, I don't shed tears. When I think about what is happening around me, I am oblivious. I don't care. I am careless. Why is that? And one of the reasons, and these are symptoms of what? Of qaswatul qalb, the hardening of the heart. And the mission of the Quran and the teachings of Islam through the Ahl al-Bayt and the infallible book is to soften our hearts, to make it more receptive, so that we can indeed be inspired and motivated to move ourselves in this wonderful journey. And the final point as to why we need to discuss this all-important idea is that so that we should not have hopes outside our capabilities. This is referred to in Islamic spirituality as tulul amal. When you and I have desires and aspirations, and when we think about death, we think, you know what, my life is short. Let's focus on what really matters. Let's focus on what really can help me. When we ponder over this, we recognize the importance of it. But the question arises here, and that is, when it comes to the school of the Ahl al-Bayt, specifically Sayyid al-Shuhada Aba Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi, how and in which way did he prepare for death? And what are the lessons that we can learn from Karbala, this amazing university of values and principles, this university for all mankind, this universal place whereby people seek inspiration? There is an important lesson in that university, and that is how Sayyid al-Shuhada approached this subject. One of the first things that we learn is that Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi did what? He left a will. He left a will to his brother Mohammed ibn al-Hanafiyyah, which states what? The will outlines the objective of his mission and his revolution. This is an important lesson for you and I in the preparation for death, as we begin this examination, and I require your patience and understanding as we go through the intricate details of what helps us in this process. The first thing that you and I should do is to have our wills ready. Don't tell me that you're young. Don't tell me that you're 16, 17, 20, 21, 30, 40. These are lame excuses. How many of us have heard of instances whereby the youth, young, have passed away and left this world without any underlying problems, whether it was an accident or a natural death? Therefore, it is around the corner for each and every one of us. And the traditions from the Ahl al-Bayt alayhum as-salam says, "Man mata wa lam yakun lahu wasiyya, mata mitat al-jahiliyya." This is the statement of the Holy Prophet of Islam. Peace and blessings be upon him and his holy progeny. Whomsoever dies and has not left a will, dies the death of the Jahiliyyah. Our ulama say leaving a will is highly recommended, but in certain instances it's wajib. Why is it wajib? If you have salah, or if you have khums and zakah, or any other obligations and duties that you have not fulfilled or performed. If you had debts, if you've given people money and you have not returned it, it's incumbent for you to write this and to ensure that the will is ready and under your pillow. According to what? According to the ahadith. It prepares you for the eventuality. What does this will have? This will would have a third of your wealth, and whatever you have, dedicated towards a cause. Dedicated to whatever you wish. It could be for the majalis of Aba Abdullah. It could be for the orphans. It could be to build an Islamic center. It could be for any charitable purpose. Or it could be for those who would inherit your wealth. For the inheritors.
And the rest of your wealth is what is given to those who are your inheritors, according to Sharia law. But also what you write in that will is where you wish to be buried. It's what kind of actions you want your children, your family to do for you, to remember you after you pass away, to visit your grave, to perform something and a good deed in your name. My dear brothers and sisters, if you have not written a will, then make it a commitment in this month of Muharram to write one. Seek help in ensuring that you prepare for this journey, this absolutely factual journey that each and every one of us will go through by first of all writing that will. Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi highlighted the purpose of his mission in this will that he left to his brother. He said, "Inni lam akhruj ashran wala adran wala zaliman wala mufsida ولكنني خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي أريد أن أأمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر." That the mission was absolutely crystal clear. This is number one. This is how Sayyid al-Shuhada would prepare us and teach us how to advance towards this eventuality. Number two, what do we learn from the school of Karbala? We learn from the school of Karbala that live your life just as if you are dying tomorrow. Just like how Amir al-Mu'mineen says when he famously examines this idea. He says, "Aish, live in this world كأنك تموت غدا." Just as if you are dying tomorrow. Our scholars say when you approach Salah, pray as if this is your final prayer. Salli salat al-muwaddi'. None of us knows what will happen tomorrow. And when you and I prepare ourselves by reflecting and thinking that tomorrow is our final day, it's our final few hours in this world, it places everything in context and makes us in the best possible position. When we look at the ashab of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, indeed they were the greatest manifestation. That when they came on the night of Ashuraa, Imam al-Hussein tested them in many occasions. throughout his journey from Medina to Mecca and from Mecca to Karbala, where he stopped at least in 45 places, 45 locations he stopped. He would tell them what was about to happen. Yet indeed, most of them passed the examination and they were ready for this eventuality.
They would embrace the death, just like how the awliyaullah indeed would do so. Imam al-Hussein salamullahi alayhi would teach you and I also what? Would teach you and I that in this journey, one of the most important things to begin with is what? Seek tawbah and repentance. Understand the problems that you and I face when it comes to sinning. We end with this, that someone came to him and said, Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I have a problem. And my problem is that I sin too many times. Most of us maybe can relate to this. I'm sitting in front of the television screen, I'm watching a Hollywood movie, something haram comes on. I can't turn away. I look at it. I have illicit relationships. I gossip. I backbite. I listen to haram music. I associate myself with the wrong crowd. This man would come to Imam al-Hussein and would say to him, this is my problem. I am sinning. Can you give me a prescription? Can you help me? Imam said, yes. You. And if you can fulfill these 5 scenarios, then you can sin as much as you wish, as much as you want. Number 1, go to a place where Allah cannot see you and sin as much as you like. Can you do that? The man says, no, Ya ibn Rasulullah. Everywhere Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. Allahu sami'un basir. I cannot do that. Imam then looks at him and says, what about going to a place where Allah is not in charge of, He's not the guardian of? Once again, the man says, this is impossible. Allah is the guardian of everything. He looks after everything. Imam says, then if you cannot fulfill this condition, go to a place or eat from that which does not belong to Allah. It's not rizq of the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala. The man once again says that I'm unable to do so. Every single thing is from Allah. This is all His rizq. Imam says, then how about when the angel of death comes to you and takes your soul? Say to him, my friend, I'm not ready. Can you come back another time? I'm not in a position for you to take my soul. Can you do that? If you can do that, then sin as much as you like. The man stood, he froze. He recognized that this was impossible. He was hoping for the 5th point. He said, maybe number 5, I can do it. Imam says, on the day of judgment, when the angel of death, Malik, comes and takes you towards Jahannam because of your sinning, tell him, excuse me, I think you've got your directions wrong. Take me to Jannah instead. Can you do that? Can you object to being taken to Jahannam? The man says, no, Ya ibn Rasulullah, I can't. Imam alayhi salam is sending us a clear message and a signal on a prescription on how indeed we can prepare ourselves for this important journey. And the school of Karbala educates us in the subject and in the phenomena of death. That Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, on a day like tomorrow, reaches a particular land. Al-Hurr ibn Yazid al-Riyahi, who is the commander of the army of Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, had received a letter saying that now you have to stop Hussein wherever he is. However, stop him in a place away from water. Al-Hurr comes and reads this letter to Imam. Remember that Al-Hurr had an army of 1,000 that had come to surround Imam al-Hussein on his journey towards Kufa and to stop him and derail him from reaching Kufa. Al-Hurr says to Imam, he says that I am commanded to stop you here. Imam says, can we walk just a bit more? Hurr agrees. They walk just a bit more until Hurr says, I cannot any longer allow you to continue your journey. Imam stops. He asks, what is the name of this land? They say to him, Ya ibn Rasulullah, this land is called Nainawa. He says, has it got any other name? They say, yes, this is called Al-Ghadiriya. He says, is it known by another title? A third man says, Yabna Rasulillah, this is the land of Karbala. Imam al-Hussein says, Allahumma inni a'udu bika min al-karbi wal-bala. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from the trials and the difficulties and the calamities. He then commands his family to sit down on this land. Ha huna mahattu rihalina. This is the place that we will sit down and establish our tents. Then he looks at them and says, this is the place where we will be killed. This is the place whereby our blood will be shed. This is the place whereby our children and our women will be taken as captives. Allahu Akbar. Imam is preparing his family and his Ahl al-Bayt for this land to recognize what will happen on this land. But tell me, the next time they returned to Karbala, when was this? When they left Karbala on the 11th of Muharram, they returned on the 40th, on Yawm al-Arba'een. The caravan of the captives, Sayyid al-Sajideen, Zayn al-Abideen, together with Sayyida Zainab and the daughters of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, return back to the land of Karbala. They sit, they surround the graves of their loved ones. The narrations tell us that Sayyida Zainab had under her abba something. She asked Imam Zayn al-Abidin, Dullani ila qabri akhi al-Hussein. Take me to the grave of my brother Aba Abdullah. Sayyida Zainab sits next to the grave of Hussein. This grave that has no head, the body that was decapitated. Sayyida Zainab takes out the head of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. Allahu Akbar. This head, what kind of journey did it have from Karbala all the way towards Kufa and Sham and all the way back to the land of Karbala? What happened to this head of Hussein ibn Ali? The same head that was kissed and beloved towards by Rasulullah. It was embraced by the Messenger of Allah. What happened to it on the palace of Yazid? When Yazid al-La'in would look at the head of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, when he would poke the head of Hussein with a stick, when he would hit the lips of Aba Abdullah with a stick, a man who was the companion of Rasulullah would look at this and says, Wayhak, what is it that you're doing? This is the mouth and the head that Rasulullah embraced and kissed. How dare you do such a thing to the head of Hussein? And this is the same head that was carried on a spear. This is the head that indeed fell and was crushed under the roofs of the horses. Allahu Akbar. What else did this head see? The head saw the young daughter of Hussein by the name of Ruqayya. She was crying to see the head of her father Aba Abdullah. She was only 3 or 4 years of age. In Sham she wept and cried and said, where is my father Hussein? At that moment Yazid, who wanted to sleep, was disturbed by the cries of Ruqayya, the young 3-year-old daughter of Aba Abdullah, otherwise known as Sakina. She would cry out, Abi ya Ya Aba Abdullah, where are you? Yazid said, send her the head. At that moment she is presented with a bowl which is covered. She looks at it, she says, I did not request any water or food. I'm not hungry or thirsty. I want my father Hussein. When the covering is removed, she looks at the head. Allahu Akbar, she embraces it, cries out, Abata, man aytamani bisaghri, man fa'ala bika hadha. Oh my father, who is it that's done this to you? Who is it that's made me an orphan? She is then quiet. No one can hear the cries from the daughter of Hussein. Imam Zayn al-Abidin calls out to his auntie Zainab, Amma Zainab, خذي أختي فلقد فارقت روحها هذه الدنيا. Her soul has departed from this world. She is passed away. Allahu Akbar. Sayyida Zainab sits next to the grave of Aba Abdullah with the head of Hussein, joins the head to the body and weeps and cries and says, Akhi Hussein, the amana that you gave to me to look after your daughter Ruqayya, I left her in Sham. She is no longer there. At that moment she looks at her nephew Imam Zayn al-Abidin and says, Dullani ila qabri akhi Aba al-Fadl al-Abbas. This was the protector of Zainab. This was the one who would look after her. Zainab would sit next to the grave of Abu Fadl, weep and cry, and she would say, Akhi Aba al-Fadl, you are the one who brought me to Karbala. You are the one who looked after me. Ya Aba al-Fadl, who is the one who will take me back to Medina? What kind of faji'ah, what kind of musibah is this? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. نسألك اللهم وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم. يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب، ثبت قلوبنا على دينك. إلهي بفاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها، يا الله تقبل منا هذا القليل، فرج عنا وعن أهلنا فرجا عاجلا قريبا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم شافي وعافي مرضى المؤمنين والمؤمنات بحق مريض كربلاء زين العابدين المؤسسون لهذا المجلس الشريف. تقبل اللهم أعمالهم، وإلى أرواح أمواتهم وأرواح أموات الحاضرين. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة تسبقها صلوات.